Hello, I am Imara Jones, host of The Last Sip on FSTV, but I'm here now at Netroots to have a series of conversations with leading progressive people, candidates at this important time of social change. And today we are thrilled to be joined by Danica Roem, who represents the 13th District of Virginia in the Virginia House of Delegates, which is essentially just south of Washington, D.C. So thank you for taking the time to join today.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
So congratulations again on your historic win last year in 2017, winning in a year in which Democrats hadn't been predicted to do very well at all, and did better than expected in Virginia, but also is historic because you are the first trans person to be elected to a state legislature in the history of the United States.
Elected and seated.
Elected and seated.
Yeah. So it was Althea Garrison was elected, but she wasn't out yet.
Right.
Stacey Lawton had won, but she wasn't seated. So
elected and seated in the history of the United States. So that's a big win. Before you hadn't had political experience, really, right? You had been a journalist.
Well, I covered politics as a reporter for 10 and a half years, so I knew the system pretty well.
Right, but you weren't a politician.
Correct.
So it's always different when you're inside the system. So I've worked in politics and I'm a journalist, and I know that they're radically different. So I'm curious as to how you have found that transition at all, or is it pretty much exactly as you expected?
Well, the most important thing that I took out from that was that my experience as a reporter directly influenced my public policy platform. And most important with that is that, I spent 9 years, 2 months and 2 weeks serving as, the lead reporter of the Gainesville Times, covering my lifelong home community of Prince William County and authoring more than 2,500 news stories about the greater Prince William County area from 2006 to 2015. So I knew my district inside and out. As a product of my district, I knew that traffic, jobs, schools, and healthcare were going to be the most important issues, and equality too. And the way that I saw that was a lot of Democrats had talked about transportation very vaguely, but we hadn't always been really good at pinpointing exactly what it is. And I took my journalism training from one of my professors who used to say, that's vague, be specific. And so I said, okay, then instead of traffic, jobs, and schools, it was fix Route 28, bring high-paying jobs to Innovation Park, raise teacher pay, so it's the lowest in Northern Virginia, and make sure that we can expand Medicaid to cover 3,700 of my then uninsured constituents. And now that we got Medicaid expansion passed, that's going to go up to 3,800 of my constituents now. And it's just absolutely incredible because I was uninsured for 2.5 years leading up until I was sworn in, and now I'm still uninsured for another 3 weeks. So I know what that feels like, because as a reporter, we don't always make a lot of money. And especially when you're working for weekly newspapers, that's been my experience. Where I had insurance when I was working for the Gainesville Times, but I didn't afterward. And I think it's really good to have that perspective. But I also had the perspective of someone who covered national and state level campaigns when I was writing for the Hotline, which is part of the National Journal in Washington, D.C. And I had that experience covering local and state politics for the Gainesville Times. So I had a really good balance. I was well qualified for the position that I ran for, and I ran.
So, in the time that you have been in the state legislature, have those issues continued to hold as the most important for your constituents? And I'm wondering if you can also talk a little bit about whether or not you believe the specificity of your platform is a roadmap for other Democrats, and how was it, and the role that it played in your own victory?
I can only speak from my own experience. I can't say that every single thing that I did is what every other candidate should do, but I do certainly believe that voters like knowing where their candidates stand on issues, and that the idea that we need to be as intentionally vague as possible is really doing a disservice to politics campaigning and to the voters' intelligence and integrity, because the voters do want to know not just where you stand on an issue, but how much is it going to cost, how are you going to pay for it, what's going to look like, how are you going to get it done, who do you need to get on board in order to get it done, has it been tried before? There's a whole lot of things that need to go into your platform for every issue that you start bringing up. And so when I was talking about fixing Route 28, I had a very specified platform. And as soon as I got into office, I introduced my resolution, HJ 68, to request VDOT to have an alternative intersection design study along the Route 28 corridor in Yorkshire to look at the 5 traffic lights that we have there and how can we replace them with roundabouts or overpasses or flyovers or something else. That level of detail, allows the voters to hold you accountable once you are in office. And I know that it seems weird when you're an elected official to say, like, yes, voters, it is very okay to hold your elected officials accountable. And I say, yes, that's a very good thing, because that means that it's the stuff that I put in my campaign platform is not just a bunch of BS. The stuff I campaigned on is exactly what I've been doing in the state legislature. I told the people in the 13th district that I would bring a reporter's eye to Richmond. Well, I authored 4 government accountability bills. That's a reporter's eye, including a shield law to protect reporters from being jailed for protecting the identity of a confidential source. That's the sort of stuff that I put in immediately. I put in 4 bills meant to rein in public service corporations and utilities and regulated monopolies who have undue influence in the General Assembly. And I put in bills that were just for constituent service bills, like making sure that a health insurance company can't just tell you that if you're an amputee that having an arm is a luxury. Well, one of my constituents heard that, and so put in a bill to deal with that. Put in a bill to make sure that no child is shamed in school for carrying school lunch debts. And even though my bill ended up dying on a party line vote, we got a much more narrow version of that done, and I was able to sign on as the chief co-patron for a bill that Delegate Patrick Hope authored, and we got that one signed into law. So that's great, and that's a great first step to making sure that every child can have 2 hot meals a day, and they don't have to get shamed for it.
Mm-hmm. So again, like the specificity that you have and the detail that you have, I'm wondering, was that the thing that, in what way did that drive your race more than the fact that you are a trans woman? It sounds like to me that if you go into a room and you're like, we're going to do 2 meals a day and all the things that you just listed, that's actually
here's
drives
how to pay for it. Right. Here's where this funding source is going to come from. Here's how much it's going to cost.
Right.
Because I'm a reporter, I can go into specificity on bills and on public policy issues with a level of detail and a level of genuine interest that not every person in elective office is going to have. True. But at the same time, what that also does, along with allowing voters to hold you accountable for that, is that you're creating an accurate perception to the public, saying she really knows what she's talking about. Yeah, maybe I don't get the trans part, but I do get what it means to have a really bad commute, and she really seems to know a lot about my commute on Route 28 and I-66 every day. Yeah, maybe trans is kind of weird to me, but hey, she really took it to Amazon and Dominion as a reporter, and now she's, talking about her plan to, fight the power lines going through here. She really cares about this community. She really cares about people like me, and I think she's going to do a really good job. So by putting all that stuff out there, one of the things that's so important that I tell other trans people is it's never trans but, it's trans and. I don't say I'm trans but I really just care about roads. No, I'm transgender and I have a lot of good public policy ideas regarding I-66, Route 28, and civil rights as well as dealing with inequality, as well as dealing with equity, as well as dealing with a lot of other issues that are very important to us, because to be a good reporter, you have to know a lot about a lot. And to be a good delegate, I have to know a lot about a lot. My skill set that I developed as a reporter is directly transferable to the skill set that I need to be a good legislator. And because I'm extremely constituent service focused, and I make sure that no matter what you look like, where you come from, how you worship, or who you love, that you are welcomed in the office of the people of the 13th district, that you are welcomed, celebrated, respected, and protected because of who you are, not despite it, and that you're able to thrive in our community because of who you are, not for what discriminatory politicians tell you you're supposed to be. When you have that message of inclusion and inclusivity in general, then that means that you're not singling out and stigmatizing the very people you were elected to serve in the first place. So that's how I was able to balance, the historic nature of my campaign as a trans woman with the constituent service aspect of it, of saying that I work for all of my constituents.
So how have you found personally your reception as a trans person in the state legislature amongst your colleagues?
Oh yeah, well, so my colleagues, I haven't encountered too much with transphobia in the General Assembly building itself. But then as soon as session ended, the first attack that came against me was for co-patron, or being a chief co-patron, so not even my bill, but just being a chief co-patron of a bill to mandate health insurance companies have to cover transition-related healthcare, because LGBTQ healthcare is healthcare. It's not an option. It is, we are following our doctor's orders. And to get attacked for that, as soon as session ended, they weren't attacking my transportation bills. They weren't attacking my government accountability bills. It wasn't even a dog whistle, it was just a bullhorn of transphobia. And I said, okay, fine, then I'll raise money off of it. And now you all broke it. You all have to own that for the entirety of the next election cycle. And I will make sure that every single LGBTQ donor in the country knows that this is still where you're at. And I want to make sure that my constituents know that you're not attacking my constituent service record, because I have a great constituent service record. You didn't attack any of the bills I authored. You know why? Because it's what my constituents asked me to put in. Pretty hard to fight something when you're representing your district. And for them to then say, like, oh, well, they called trans healthcare unnecessary liberal lifestyle choices. Excuse me, I think my 3 doctors who work on my gender dysphoria, my psychologist, my endocrinologist, my voice therapist, know a little bit something more about gender dysphoria than the Republican Party of Virginia's fundraising team. So that, if someone throws transphobia at me, just brush it off, and I keep serving my constituents, because that's what I'm elected to do.
What do you think, in terms of, like, because you're getting ready for the next election, right? So
yep.
It's election time.
I'm up in 2019.
In 2019.
At the same time, re-election campaign's already begun.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's 2018. Yep. So how are you preparing for that? And so far, what do you think is the response of your leadership by your constituents?
So I think one of the most important things with the leadership of my constituents is that they help me author my bills. They testified for my bills, 6 bills in a row at one point, where they were driving down an hour and a half to 2 hours to Richmond to speak for 3 minutes in front of a committee. And so I've developed a very tight bond with my constituents who have been so engaged in my legislative agenda, because it is the people's legislative agenda of the 13th district. That's what's so important with this, and that I've been ever present in my community, while at the same time recognizing that I have, the profile of a local state legislator with a national profile, right? And so that's why, earlier this week I was having one-on-one meetings with constituents about Route 28. And then I'm here today, trying to encourage people from across the country to step up and be a part of their government, because this is our responsibility. This is a government formed by the people, which means that people who look like you and people who look like me, people who come from our backgrounds and their own unique backgrounds, have just as much of a seat at the table as anyone else, and this is their America and they need to run it too. I make sure I get that message out, while at the same time, just had a town hall meeting confirmed that we're going to be hosting on August 13th over in Gainesville to deal with, the Rollins Ford Road corridor, to make it more safe for the residents who live around there, for the commuters who drive on it. That's the sort of balance that I have, and I think that making sure that constituent service comes first, that my constituents are my leaders, and that I'm able to represent them well. And at the same time, as I gear up for re-election, as we're getting out and getting the message out right now, is making sure that people still know that the hope that we had for last year, the defiance in the face of despondency that we had last year, it's still there, and that we still have so much more work to do. And so, yeah, the 2017 election was really exciting, and everyone needs to know that the 2019 election, where we have a chance to reclaim our Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate for the first time since the 1990s in Virginia, those are absolutely worth fighting for, because yes, Medicaid expansion was wonderful. I'm so thrilled we got that done for 400,000 Virginians across the Commonwealth, but we'll still have another 350,000 who are still uninsured, and we need to fight for them too. We need to fight for the Equal Rights Amendment. Virginia would be the last state needed to ratify that. Then we need one change in the federal government to get it done. And we have so much more work ahead of us.
One last question. So what do you think is the role? What do trans people have to say about America right now that people need to hear?
There's 2 things I'll say. One is that, yes, there are unique experiences that are exclusive to the trans community that other people will not experience. And at the same time, we are just as much of a part of America as any other person who's here today, and we are just as much of a part of America as any other person who is in the United States of America, and that we have good ideas. A lot of us are very well qualified for office, and a lot of us do genuinely believe in constituent service and public service, and that we enter politics to do the right thing because we're tired of being scared, and we know what it's like to be scared. We know what it's like to be vulnerable. Who is going to be more honest with you in public office than someone who's had to express their truth so visibly, and to go through the vulnerability that we have to go through, and then we're still willing to be honest with ourselves, where we know, as a reporter, I know that I had to cover the two brutal homicides of young black transgender women in Montgomery County, Maryland, and so I know, as a white woman, knocking on doors, yes, it is still risky for me, but the experience that a lot of trans women of color have in public is downright deadly and downright fatal. And yes, that level of hostility does absolutely happen to, women who are, trans women who aren't of color. And at the same time, we recognize the inherent danger that so many trans women of color have to face. And as a reporter, I know what it's like to have the father of one young black trans woman call me on the phone 6 months after I covered his daughter's homicide, crying to me on the phone, I miss my baby girl, I miss my baby girl. I don't forget someone like him, and that I can use my national platform right now to tell that story, to elevate other folks, because I don't believe in a government in which I get to the front of the line and say, how come you're not up here? When I get to the front of the line, then it's my job to go, join me. And I put my arm around anyone who wants to do that. If you are, trying to make a more inclusive America where we celebrate each other instead of, divide and discriminate against each other.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so
for
kindly
joining us, and congratulations. And we'll be following your re-election campaign with great interest, and good luck in that.
Thank you very kindly.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us here on FSTV, Free Speech TV, for these ongoing conversations at Netroots, and stay tuned. We'll be back and have a lot more.